Welcome to the law offices of Chris M. Ingram's Immigration News Show. Today, we ask, is your future bright? We would like to thank attorney Chris M. Ingram and staff at the law offices of Chris M. Ingram for their hard work in preparing the research for this show, which draws on a wide variety of news sources from both sides of the aisle, providing a balanced view. Attorney Ingram is also a vocal advocate for the rights and protection of immigration applicants, although our coverage is designed to be nonpartisan. Please don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe to our channel. We are also on Spotify, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, X, Reddit, and Instagram, where we're growing rapidly thanks to our social media team. You can also visit our website on www.breakthroughusa.com. We'd love to see you there. Disclaimer. Please note that this presentation should not be intended as legal advice for your specific situation. If you, a friend, or a family member would like a free consultation, you can visit our website at www.breakthroughusa.com and schedule an appointment. We'd love to hear from you and help you, if we can. We'd also like to point out that this presentation was created using AI hosts. Okay, let's dive in.
So let's start with a really maddening contradiction that our legal team highlighted.
Oh, yeah. This part of the research was fascinating.
Right. So put yourself in this position. You are, say, an AI engineer with a PhD or maybe a semiconductor process specialist.
Basically, someone with highly specialized skills.
Exactly. You've got the patents, you've got the exact skills that the global market claims to be absolutely desperate for. I mean, the media says you are the most valuable asset on the planet right now.
Yeah, you're the golden ticket.
You are.
Yeah.
And yet, behind closed doors, your employer is treating you like, well, a massive liability.
And that right there is the exact hidden crisis we are unpacking today in this deep dive.
It really is a crisis.
Because, based on the extensive legal research prepared by attorney Chris Ingram and his team, there is this massive once-in-a-generation opportunity unfolding right now for top-tier STEM professionals in the U.S.
Yes.
But it is masked by just an incredible amount of anxiety. I want you, the listener, to really picture this scenario because our team noted just how pervasive this has become.
It's happening everywhere.
Right. So 1 week, recruiters are just blowing up your inbox. They're practically, waiting outside your apartment building to hand you a signing bonus.
You feel totally invincible.
Exactly. You feel invincible. But then, literally the very next week, they go completely silent.
Crickets.
Yeah. And worse, when you sit down with your current employer's HR department to discuss the timeline for your visa sponsorship, they suddenly start looking at their shoes.
Yeah, they start using all those corporate buzzwords.
Right. Words like budgetary review or, headcount reassessment.
And it creates this profound psychological whiplash. Because you have the objective data. I mean, your resume, your publications, your direct contributions to the company's bottom line.
The hard proof.
Right. The proof that is just screaming that you are highly valued. But the immediate visceral feedback loop from your employer is communicating instability.
It's essentially telling you that your foundation in the United States is written in pencil.
That's a great way to put it. It's written in pencil.
It's like holding what you absolutely know is a winning lottery ticket. You've checked the numbers a dozen times. You know it's worth a fortune.
But you can't cash it.
Exactly. Every time you walk down to the redemption center to cash it in, you find out they've moved the building across town. Or they tell you, oh, the rules for cashing it have temporarily changed. You need to come back in 6 months.
Which is just agonizing.
Right. The very skills you possess are exactly what America desperately needs right now, to the point of literal national urgency, yet you are left feeling completely stuck in the mud.
Completely stuck.
So let's break this down a bit. What is actually happening behind the curtain here? If a company is starved for AI or hardware talent, why on earth would their HR department drag their feet on sponsoring the exact person who can solve their problems?
Well, to understand that disconnect, we have to look past the individual employee for a second. We need to examine the broader macroeconomic factors that our researchers synthesized.
Okay, lay it out for me.
It's really a convergence of massive global shifts that create a very specific kind of corporate risk aversion. So first, yes, U.S. tech giants are locked in this brutal, existential, global talent war. They need the absolute best minds.
Right, to maintain their edge.
Exactly. But simultaneously, supply chain chaos is quietly rewriting the rules of how these massive companies forecast their futures.
Okay, wait. Let me challenge that connection right there. How does a tangled supply chain affect whether an AI engineer sitting in an office in Silicon Valley gets sponsored for a green card?
It sounds totally disconnected, right?
Yeah, it seems like two entirely different worlds. I mean, one is about software and the other is about, cargo ships.
Well, they are inextricably linked through corporate finance and risk assessment. Think about it. Imagine a company building the next generation of AI data centers.
Okay.
To build those data centers, they need advanced hardware. And to get that hardware, they rely on a global supply chain of critical minerals, things like gallium, germanium, or specific rare earth elements.
Okay, I'm starting to see it.
Yeah, and our researchers explicitly noted that severe shortages and geopolitical export controls on these exact materials are happening right now.
Wow.
So when a company experiences these bottlenecks, their financial forecasting for the next 3 to 5 years goes from being a predictable straight line to a highly volatile roller coaster.
Ah, I see. So the CFO looks at the spreadsheet, sees that they literally can't guarantee when the hardware for the new data center will actually arrive, and suddenly they get spooked about their capital expenditures.
Precisely. The AI demand is exploding, sure, but the physical constraints of the broader economy are tightening.
So they panic.
Right. When HR departments and corporate boards see physical supply chain risks, their reflex is to preserve optionality. They react by freezing or slowing down long-term fixed commitments.
And a complex, multi-year immigration sponsorship is viewed as a long-term fixed commitment.
Exactly. They want the flexibility to pivot if the market turns. But for you, the STEM professional, that corporate flexibility translates directly into personal peril.
Wow. So the HR department's hesitation might have absolutely zero to do with your performance.
Nothing at all.
You could be writing the most elegant code in the world, but because a shipment of rare earth metals is delayed in a port halfway across the world, your visa process just gets put on ice.
That is exactly what happens. And this leads to a critical warning from our legal team. The absolute worst thing you can do in this volatile environment is to adopt a passive mindset.
Right, just waiting it out.
Yeah, because the instinct for many brilliant engineers is to just put their head down, write better code, publish one more paper, and just wait for the corporate winds to shift back in their favor.
Which feels safe in the moment.
It does. But looking away even for a few months can cause your absolute best window of opportunity to slam shut.
Because while you're waiting for HR to figure out their supply chain issues, the clock on your visa is ticking.
The literal clock is ticking, yes, but there is a more insidious danger that our attorneys call employer dependency.
Unpack that term for us. Employer dependency.
Well, when you wait, the evidence of your most groundbreaking work starts to age. The immigration system relies heavily on demonstrating that your work is at the absolute cutting edge.
Okay.
So if you published a seminal paper or built a revolutionary model, its impact is highest right now, today. If you wait 3 years for your employer to finally get around to sponsoring you, that 2023 paper doesn't have the same punch in a 2026 world.
Oh, that makes total sense. In fast-moving fields, a 3-year-old achievement is practically ancient history to an immigration adjudicator.
Exactly. Your options shrink at the exact moment. Your highly specific expertise is theoretically worth the most.
That is a terrifying thought. You are at the absolute peak of your powers doing work that is changing the industry, but because you are tethered to a hesitant, risk-averse employer, your leverage is just quietly draining away.
It's quietly draining away every single day.
So to really understand how to break this dependency, we need to examine the specific sectors where this paradox is exploding right now.
Let's do it.
Let's start with the software that is essentially eating the world all over again. I'm talking about Agentic AI.
Oh, yeah. This is a monumental shift. I mean, we have moved so far beyond the era of simple chatbots and next token predictors.
It feels like that happened overnight.
It really does. We are firmly in the era of autonomous execution now.
Completely. And the legal research details this 2026 reality with absolute clarity. We all remember when AI was just a tool where you typed in a prompt and it gave you a recipe for pancakes.
Right. Or drafted a polite email to your boss.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that was impressive, sure, but it was essentially a static transaction. Today, models from XAI, Google, OpenAI, Anthropic, they aren't just answering questions, they are reasoning.
They're planning.
Yes. They're engaging in what we call autonomous loops. You give the system a high-level goal, and it breaks that goal down into 20 subtasks, realizes it made an error on step 4, corrects itself, writes the necessary code, tests it, and executes the final product with almost zero human input. We are talking about autonomous agents. And there is a human story in our research that perfectly illustrates the whiplash of this transition.
You're referring to the case study of Liam, right?
Yes, Liam.
Yeah.
So he is a Korean software engineer currently working in the U.S. on his OPT.
Which, for those who might not know, is optional practical training. Yeah. It's the temporary work authorization you get after graduating from a U.S. university.
Exactly. And our legal team shared his story, and the timeline here is just wild. Just last quarter, literally a few months ago, Liam's day-to-day job was debugging models. He was in the trenches.
Right, doing the manual work.
Yeah, he would look at a piece of code, find the syntax error, rewrite the line, and push the update. Fast forward to today, and his role has completely morphed.
It's a totally different job.
He isn't typing out lines of code anymore. Now, he orchestrates entire teams of AI agents. These agents are autonomously running experiments, identifying bugs, and optimizing the code base overnight while Liam is asleep.
Laura from Chris M. Ingram has worked on my case. Ongoing. My experience working with her so far has been that she has been prompt, provide very detailed guidance, and has shown tremendous ownership. She seems to be vested in my case, and her replies aren't mechanical. So far, I have been impressed with her and the professionalism this organization has shown. I have been working with them for over a year. Slowness on timeline has been purely on my part, and they have been very professional.
I know. He wakes up, pours his coffee, and reviews finished, highly optimized projects that would have taken a human team 3 weeks to complete.
It is just a staggering leap in both productivity and the scope of a single engineer's influence.
It is. And Liam is obviously thrilled by the sheer power of the technology he is wielding. And here's where I want to push back on the narrative that AI is making everything easier. Our legal research notes that Liam is actually highly anxious.
He's very stressed.
He is deeply concerned about how to document this rapid shift for his long-term U.S. immigration plans. Why is this incredible speed and automation actually a massive vulnerability for professionals like him?
Wow.
I mean, if he's doing the work of 10 engineers, shouldn't his immigration case be a slam dunk?
It's a brilliant question, and it really strikes at the absolute heart of immigration law for knowledge workers. The vulnerability lies in the mechanics of legal documentation and the burden of proof.
Okay, break that down for me.
Think about it. When you are physically debugging code line by line, it is very easy to point to your specific human contribution. You can put a document in front of an adjudicator and say, I manually rewrote this specific module, and because of my human ingenuity, the system's efficiency increased by 15%.
Right. It's tangible. It's cause and effect. Liam typed X, so Y happened.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But when you transition to orchestrating autonomous agents, the line between your human ingenuity and the machine's output becomes incredibly blurred to an outside observer.
Especially to an immigration officer who, let's be honest, is not an AI researcher.
Right. If the AI agents literally wrote the code, ran the tests, and deployed the fix overnight while Liam was sleeping, how does Liam prove that he is the extraordinary talent?
Oh, wow.
How does he prove he isn't just a passenger watching a really smart machine do all the work?
Oh, I see. On paper, he looks less like the genius architect and more like a middle manager of a black box.
Precisely. While the work itself is exhilarating, if you aren't actively and strategically capturing your specific role in directing these systems, you can find yourself professionally unanchored on paper.
So what does he actually need to show?
You have to document the architecture you designed. You have to document the specific parameters and constraints you engineered that allow the agents to succeed without hallucinating or breaking the system.
Because if you just say, I used AI to optimize code, you will fail to prove your extraordinary ability.
Exactly. You have to prove that your unique understanding of agentic orchestration is what unlocked the AI's potential in the first place.
That distinction is everything. And this is vital because Liam's work isn't just cool tech. It is of massive national importance. Our researchers cited some of the biggest titans in technology to underscore the geopolitical stakes here.
Yeah, the quotes they pulled are really telling.
They really are. Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, has called AI the most transformative technology of the 21st century.
And Satya Nadella at Microsoft has stated that we are evolving from questions to agents, which perfectly describes the exact transition Liam is managing.
Right. And Sam Altman of OpenAI has explicitly said that AI agents are literally joining the workforce, materially changing the output of entire companies.
Even Bill Gates describes these agentic systems as the next major leap that will augment human capability across every single sector.
So the consensus among the world's leading technologists is that this is not a passing software fad. It is a fundamental restructuring of the global economy. The nation that dominates agentic AI dominates the next century.
Which brings us to the strategic takeaway from our attorneys here. You cannot rely on a standard corporate HR department to translate the incredible nuance of agentic orchestration into a compelling legal narrative.
They just don't have the vocabulary for it.
They don't. They will write a generic job description that makes you sound totally replaceable. You must actively take control and position this groundbreaking AI work as a strategic asset for U.S. competitiveness.
So it's about the framing.
Yes. When framed correctly, when you prove that you are the brain directing the agents and that your specific methodologies are advancing American tech leadership, this kind of bleeding-edge work dramatically strengthens any self-petition case. You elevate yourself from an employee to a national asset.
That makes total sense. You have to document the how and the why of your work, not just the what.
Exactly.
But here is where this deep dive gets really interconnected, because these AI agents, they don't run on magic. They don't run on good intentions. They require immense, mind-boggling amounts of computing power.
Oh, absolutely. The physical infrastructure.
Right. You need massive clusters of GPUs, and that relies entirely on physical hardware. Which leads us directly into the second booming sector experiencing a massive, undeniable talent crisis.
Let's pivot to hardware.
Let's do it. Let's pivot from the software eating the world to the hardware powering it.
Yeah.
The semiconductor industry.
The hardware deficit. It is arguably the most pressing geopolitical and economic bottleneck of our time. I mean, we can design all the agentic AI we want, but if we cannot physically manufacture the chips to run it, the software is totally useless.
It truly is a bottleneck. The research paints a staggering reality of what is happening on the ground in 2026. We have the SHIPS and Science Act, which has poured hundreds of billions of dollars in public and private investment into the industry.
It's a massive influx of capital.
Huge. We are seeing massive physical expansions. If you drive through places like Arizona, Texas, or Ohio, you see new fabrication plants being built by Intel, TSMC, Samsung, and global foundries.
The scale is hard to comprehend.
It really is. The concrete is being poured. The ultraviolet lithography machines, which cost hundreds of millions of dollars each, are being installed. But the domestic talent pipelines are completely, fundamentally failing to keep up.
We just don't have the people.
Exactly. We are building the most advanced factories in the history of human civilization, but we literally do not have the people to run them.
Which creates an environment of extreme, almost unimaginable pressure for the highly specialized experts who actually are currently in the system.
Exactly. Look at Diego's story from the research. He is a Brazilian process integration engineer.
Right.
He joined a brand new multi-billion-dollar fab in Texas just 6 months ago. And almost immediately upon arrival, he was handed complete ownership of a critical yield improvement project.
Which is a huge deal.
It is. Let's unpack what that actually means, because yield improvement sounds like corporate jargon, but the reality is fascinating.
It really is.
In semiconductor manufacturing, you are essentially printing billions of microscopic transistors onto a silicon wafer. Imagine trying to bake 1,000 microscopic multi-layer cakes simultaneously on a plate the size of a frisbee.
That is a brilliant analogy. The precision required borders on the impossible.
Right. And if one single speck of dust lands on that plate, or if the temperature fluctuates by a fraction of a degree, or if the chemical etching is off by a single nanometer, 50 of those microscopic cakes are completely ruined.
They're garbage.
Yeah. And Diego's job, yield improvement, is to figure out exactly where that metaphorical speck of dust came from, why the temperature fluctuated, and how to stop it from ever happening again.
Because improving yield means reducing the number of defective chips on a wafer.
Exactly. If Diego can improve the yield by even 1 or 2%, he is saving the company millions and millions of dollars. The responsibility is immense.
And he's doing this while dealing with his visa situation.
Yes. He loves the challenge, but he told our researchers that he feels this intense, crushing pressure trying to align his precarious temporary immigration status with the incredibly aggressive timelines of this new fab.
The demands on his time and his intellect are absolute. I mean, the company expects him to perform miracles on a daily basis, yet his legal foundation in the country feels entirely conditional. It is a perfect recipe for severe burnout.
It's like being asked to build the engine of a rocket ship while it's actively counting down to launch, while simultaneously not knowing if the security guards are going to let you stand on the launch pad tomorrow.
Yeah, that's exactly what it feels like.
It's an impossible mental burden. But then you look at the macro data and you realize something incredible. Diego shouldn't feel vulnerable at all. If he understood the true market dynamics, he should feel absolutely invincible.
This is where understanding the broader economic context is so empowering. Because if we look at the data provided by our researchers, Diego is actually operating from a position of immense structural power.
You mean the numbers?
The numbers regarding the talent deficit are undeniable. Deloitte projects that the global semiconductor industry will need 1 million additional skilled workers by 2030 just to keep up with current growth projections.
Feeling lost in a maze of visa types and paperwork? Don't know where to turn? We've got your back. With clear answers and real help, we'll guide you every step of the way. Let's navigate it together. Your journey starts today.
Hello, you must be Clara. Welcome to the law office of Chris M. Ingram.
Finally, I found a law firm that will help me achieve my American dream.
At this law firm, you are important to us. That's why we will be with you every step of the way. So join us at the office of Chris M. Ingram.
Wait, 1 million? That is a staggering gap for an industry that requires PhD-level physics and chemistry.
Right. And if we zoom in specifically on the United States, the Semiconductor Industry Association, along with Oxford Economics, projects a shortfall of 67,000 workers in the U.S. alone by that same year.
Just in the U.S.
Yes. And we are not talking about general laborers here. We're talking about highly specialized roles. Process engineers like Diego, device physicists, equipment technicians who know how to maintain, plasma etching tools.
The people who actually make the chips work.
Exactly. Furthermore, McKinsey points out a demographic cliff. The industry is battling incredibly high turnover and an aging workforce. The legacy knowledge that built the industry in the 80s and 90s is retiring.
Because we spent 30 years focusing on software.
Precisely. We shifted our focus to software, and as a result, there simply aren't enough new domestic experts entering the pipeline to replace the retirees, let alone staff the massive new HEPS Act fabs being built today.
So let me get this straight. Diego is essentially holding the ultimate winning lottery ticket. The U.S. government has decided that building these chips domestically is a matter of national survival.
It's a top priority.
But his specific employer's internal bureaucracy and the slow churn of the standard visa process are making him sweat. What is the actual takeaway here for hardware professionals listening to this? How do they leverage this macro data?
The strategic takeaway is a fundamental shift in perspective. You must realize that severe shortages mean specialized skills in areas like process engineering and device physics are no longer just corporate assets.
They're bigger than the company.
Much bigger. They're not just about making a tech company more profitable. Your skills directly, tangibly support U.S. national security and economic independence. The ability to manufacture advanced chips domestically is a matter of statecraft in 2026.
Wow, statecraft.
Because companies and entire nations are competing so fiercely for this incredibly limited talent pool, it creates the absolute perfect environment to argue for an extraordinary ability petition or a national interest waiver.
You are not just an employee.
No, you are the critical human infrastructure required to make the hundreds of billions of dollars invested in the HEPS Act actually succeed.
That is profound. You aren't just a guy asking HR for a favor so you can stay in Texas. You are a strategic necessity for the defense and economic future of the country. If you frame it that way, the legal case practically writes itself.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered the software that is eating the world and the silicon hardware required to power that software. Now, let's pivot to a completely different sector, but one experiencing the exact same talent bottleneck.
Let's go to biotech.
Yes, let's look at the sector that is upgrading human wetware, our bodies, our biology. I'm talking about the unprecedented boom in biomanufacturing and biotechnology.
2026 is truly a landmark year for biotech innovation. The acceleration we are witnessing, particularly in moving from theoretical research to applied, scalable medicine, is just historic.
It's unbelievable. According to the research prepared by our team, we are seeing new mRNA platforms, advanced CRISPR gene editing therapies, and highly personalized cancer treatments.
And they're moving so fast.
Right. These aren't just white papers anymore. They are moving from clinical trials to actual FDA-approved applications at speeds we have never seen before in medical history.
And this acceleration is being fueled by billions and billions of dollars in investments, largely spurred by the lessons learned over the last few years regarding pandemic preparedness, and rapid vaccine deployment.
We are living in a golden age of medical advancement.
We really are.
Yeah.
And at the absolute center of that advancement, the bottleneck dictating whether these therapies actually reach patients or just stay in a lab are the bioprocess researchers and engineers who know how to scale them.
Exactly, which brings us to Elena. Our legal team highlighted her situation, and it perfectly mirrors the pressure we saw with Diego and Semiconductors.
Her story is so compelling.
She is a Colombian bioprocess engineer. Her specific expertise is in cell therapy manufacturing. She recently hit a massive, career-defining scaling milestone.
Yeah, the cost reduction she achieved.
Yes. Her work optimized a bioreactor process that could literally reduce the cost of certain life-saving cell treatments by 40%.
40%. That is astronomical in this field.
In the world of advanced therapeutics, that is the difference between a patient actually having access to a cure and a patient being completely priced out of survival. Yet Elena told our researchers that she is completely exhausted.
She's burning out.
She feels like she's running 2 marathons at once. She is running the marathon of cutting-edge, high-stakes science, and she is simultaneously running the grueling, bureaucratic marathon of navigating the U.S. immigration system.
It is a tragic misallocation of human energy. Every hour she spends worrying about her visa status is an hour she's not spending optimizing life-saving therapies.
But here's where I have to pause and ask you to explain this because it feels completely counterintuitive.
Sure.
Elena is driving down the cost of life-saving therapies by 40%. She is making a tangible, massive, undeniably positive impact on human health. She's doing exactly what the U.S. healthcare system desperately needs.
Right.
How can someone with that level of world-changing impact still feel legally vulnerable in the U.S. immigration system? Why isn't there a red carpet rolled out for her?
It does seem entirely counterintuitive, but if we zoom out and look at the macro perspective provided by Feliz Gonzalez, the CEO of Founder Nest, who was extensively cited in our research, we can begin to understand the friction here.
Okay, what did Gonzalez point out?
Gonzalez notes that AI-driven drug discovery, CRISPR, and advanced mRNA platforms are collectively driving the next generation of pharmaceutical breakthroughs at a blistering pace. The science is moving at light speed.
Right.
But the U.S. immigration system, particularly the traditional employment-based visa categories, is inherently backward-looking and slow.
What do you mean by backward-looking?
Well, the traditional system asks for proof of past, sustained, formalized acclaim. It wants to see peer-reviewed papers that have been cited hundreds of times over several years. It wants to see major globally recognized awards. It wants to see a long history of media coverage.
And Elena doesn't have that yet.
Right. Elena feels vulnerable because she is running so fast on the cutting edge of applied science that she hasn't stopped to formalize and legally package her achievements.
Oh, wow.
She is focused on the future, making the therapy cheaper and more scalable today, while the immigration adjudicator is asking for proof of what she accomplished 3 years ago.
Ah, I see. She's literally too busy curing diseases and saving lives to stop and build her own trophy case.
Precisely. And this is the danger. The strategic takeaway from attorney Chris Ingram is that biotech professionals must actively fight this tendency. You must document your contributions now.
Don't wait for the paper to be published.
Do not wait. You cannot wait until a clinical trial is perfectly wrapped up and published in a major medical journal 3 years down the line, because the visa system demands evidence today.
So what does she use as evidence?
If you optimize a bioprocess that reduced costs by 40%, you need to document that internal milestone immediately. Advances in human health, especially in the wake of our renewed national focus on pandemic preparedness and supply chain resilience for medicine, are undeniable rock-solid pillars for EB-1A and EB-2 NIW self-petition cases.
But they are only rock solid if that impact is meticulously documented.
Exactly, and translated into a legal framework that an adjudicator can understand.
It's all about translation. You have to translate the science into the language of national interest. So across all 3 of these massive sectors, agentic AI orchestration, semiconductor process engineering, and biomanufacturing, we are seeing the exact same underlying pattern.
It's the same paradox.
We have immense talent driving massive national importance, but it is coupled with crippling anxiety caused by employer dependency dependency and a failure to proactively document their own worth in real time.
Right.
We've seen the sectors and we've felt the struggles of Liam, Diego, and Elena. Now let's pivot to the positive. Let's look at the hard data on what happens when immigrant STEM professionals actually win these battles, break free from employer dependency, and secure their permanent roots in America.
This is where the narrative shifts dramatically from a story of individual struggle and anxiety to a story of massive, disproportionate economic impact.
The proof is absolutely in the data. Our legal research provided some hard numbers regarding immigrant STEM leaders who took control of their journeys, and honestly, these statistics blew my mind.
And the numbers are staggering.
Let me run through these key data points because they paint an incredible picture. First, immigrant-founded AI companies in the U.S. have raised $167 billion in capital.
Let's just pause there.
Let me repeat that. Immigrant-founded AI companies raised $167 billion. That is 2.5 times more capital than teams founded solely by U.S.-born citizens.
We really need to let that sink in. 2.5 times more capital. That is not a minor statistical anomaly. That is a massive, blindingly clear market signal of trust, capability, and visionary leadership.
Huge.
Venture capitalists are voting with their dollars, and they are disproportionately backing immigrant founders.
And it gets even better. Immigrant founders represent 62% of the top 100 privately held U.S. AI companies.
62%.
The clear, undeniable majority of the most important, innovative private AI companies in the country were founded by immigrants. Furthermore, the research shows that mixed founding teams, meaning teams that deliberately include both immigrants and native-born citizens, grow 20% larger in terms of total employment, and they file significantly more patents than non-mixed teams.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it proves that the narrative of the immigrant innovator is not just a feel-good, aspirational story we tell ourselves.
No, it's empirical.
First of all, I would like to thank the office of Chris M. Ingram for their tireless effort in making my approval a success. The process of getting an EB-1 approval was not something small, and they worked hard for months to see that it had a positive outcome. Not only were they professional and showed teamwork in their ways of handling my case, they were patient and understanding. I would like to specifically thank Damian Santoro for his hard work and constant communication with me. He is an excellent caseworker. I would recommend anyone to this law firm.
It is a cold, hard, quantitative fact that mixed teams and immigrant founders drive outsized, disproportionate economic and technological growth in the United States.
I have to ask, why is that? What is the secret sauce there? Why do mixed teams and immigrant founders perform so exceptionally well?
Well, part of it certainly comes down to cognitive diversity. When you combine different educational backgrounds, different cultural approaches to problem solving, and the inherent resilience required to navigate moving to a new country, you create a very robust intellectual environment.
That makes sense on a human level.
But legally and structurally, our researchers point out a much more crucial mechanical reason for this massive success.
Oh, what's a mechanical reason?
These incredibly successful leaders, the ones building the $167 billion empires, did not achieve these staggering numbers while perpetually anxious on temporary visas.
Right, they weren't waiting around for HR.
Exactly. They didn't found the top AI companies in the world while terrified that an HR delay or a missed bureaucratic deadline would trigger their deportation.
You can't focus on revolutionizing an industry if you're constantly looking over your shoulder.
Exactly. They transitioned from precarious temporary statuses like the H-1B or the OPT we talked about with Liam to permanent roots. They utilized strategic planning and self-petition pathways to secure green cards.
They took control.
By doing so, they removed the artificial ceiling placed on them by employer dependency. They achieved legal stability, which unlocked their full innovative and economic potential to take risks, start companies, and hire thousands of people.
The data proves the immense value of these professionals, period. The U.S. economy quite literally depends on them. So, the ultimate question for you, the listener, is this. How do you bridge the gap?
That's the million-dollar question.
How do you get from the temporary paralyzing anxiety that Liam, Diego, and Elena are feeling right now to the permanent stability and massive success of those top AI founders? How do you actually execute that transition?
The answer lies entirely in the strategy of self-sponsorship. You have to take the reins out of your employer's hands.
Let's dive deep into that mechanism. Our legal research introduces self-sponsorship as the ultimate solution for escaping employer dependency. Specifically, we are talking about two main pathways. The EB-1A pathway, which is designated for individuals with extraordinary ability, and the EB-2 NIW, which stands for National Interest Waiver.
Let's unpack those acronyms.
Yeah, what do these actually mean?
These pathways are revolutionary compared to the standard system because they fundamentally shift the power dynamic. They do not require an employer to sponsor you.
You do it yourself.
Yes. You are petitioning the U.S. government directly, for yourself, based entirely on your own merit, your past achievements, and your projected future value to the United States.
Give me an example with the NIW.
Let's look at the National Interest Waiver, or NIW. Normally, the government requires a corporate sponsor to go through a rigorous process to prove that hiring a foreign national won't displace a domestic U.S. worker.
Which takes forever.
It does. But with the NIW, the government is essentially saying your specific work in AI or semiconductors or biotech is so vital to the entire country's future economic or security interests that we're going to waive that normal requirement entirely. We need you here, regardless of who your employer is.
It is a geopolitical fast pass for top talent.
Exactly.
And there is a massive financial realization tied to this self-sponsorship that the research highlights. It's not just about peace of mind. Once a STEM professional secures a green card through these self-sponsored routes, they are suddenly free to negotiate on the open market.
Oh, the financial impact is huge.
They aren't legally tied to the one specific company that holds their visa. And the research notes that many of these top-tier professionals, once freed from that restriction, go on to earn well over $1 million annually.
The disparity between an employer-dependent salary and a true open market salary for these elite skills can be absolutely staggering.
I really want to explore the mechanics of that. It seems the green card isn't just about geography or the right to live in a certain zip code. It's literally the key to unlocking your true financial market value.
It is the key.
Why does employer dependency suppress a worker's value so heavily in the first place? If Diego is worth millions to the company, why aren't they paying him millions while he's on a visa?
It comes down to an economic concept known as monopsony power.
Monopsony. Okay, explain that.
A monopoly is when there is only one seller of a product. A monopsony is when there is only one buyer. When you are on a temporary visa tied to a specific employer, like an H-1B, that employer is effectively the only legal buyer of your labor in the market.
It's like the old reserve clause in professional baseball, or the studio system in early Hollywood. You couldn't just leave and play for another team if they offered you more money. Your original team owned your contract.
That is a perfect historical analogy. If you are on an employer-sponsored visa and you want to leave for a better opportunity, you have to find another employer who is not only willing to hire you, but willing to go through the immense financial cost, the bureaucratic time delay, and the legal risk of transferring your visa sponsorship.
Which is a huge hassle.
Many companies simply won't do it. Therefore, your current employer knows you are essentially captive. They don't have to pay you your true open market value, because your ability to walk across the street and take a better offer from a competitor is severely restricted by your immigration status.
Wow.
They have monopsony power over you.
That makes total sense. They are paying you a discounted rate because they know you can't easily leave.
Exactly. Securing a self-petitioned green card completely shatters that monopsony. It restores perfect competition for your skills. You are finally allowed to be a free agent in a market that is utterly starved for your exact talent. That is why salaries jump so dramatically.
You become a free agent. I love that. So to really understand how to execute this strategy, our legal team provided some incredible insights drawn from decades of experience guiding high-achieving STEM professionals.
Let's get into the specifics.
Let's synthesize this into actionable positioning strategies for the three sectors we discussed. If I'm listening to this and I'm Liam in AI or Diego in hardware or Elena in biotech, how do I actually frame my specific daily work to prove I am in the national interest? Let's start with AI and autonomous systems. If I'm orchestrating agents, how do I position that?
The guidance from our attorneys is clear. You must elevate the narrative of your work. You cannot just describe the technical function of the agents you build.
Right, no jargon about syntax.
Exactly. You must frame the development and orchestration of these autonomous systems as a direct mechanism for advancing U.S. technological leadership. It is not just about writing clever code that makes a specific software product run faster. It is about ensuring the United States maintains its strategic competitive edge in the global AI race against rival nations.
So you focus on the big picture.
You focus heavily on the real-world impact, the scalability, and the national economic importance of the systems you are directing. You are building the infrastructure of the future economy.
Right, you have to connect your keyboard to the country's geopolitical standing.
What about hardware? Let's go back to Diego. He's stressed because there aren't enough workers, but earlier you said that shortage actually helps him. How does a massive talent shortage strengthen his self-petition case? Let me challenge that. If the shortage is that bad, shouldn't the fab just fast-track his green card themselves to keep him happy?
In theory, yes.
Yep.
But as we discussed, corporate HR is slow, risk-averse, and driven by short-term budget cycles, not long-term strategy. Relying on them is a gamble.
But in a self-petition, that talent shortage is your greatest asset. It profoundly strengthens the national interest argument. The legal strategy is to meticulously document how Diego's highly specific skills in yield improvement and process integration directly support U.S. chip independence.
You connect the dots for the adjudicator.
You connect his daily work on the factory floor directly to the goals of the THPS Act. The documented, undeniable national shortage proves that his skills are urgently needed and cannot be easily replaced by the domestic workforce. He becomes the solution to a stated national vulnerability.
That is brilliant. You leverage the crisis to prove your indispensability. And finally, what about our biotech innovators like Elena? With the science moving so incredibly fast, when is the right time to actually start this process? Should she wait until the 40% cost reduction is published and peer-reviewed?
The attorneys emphasize that timing is absolutely everything, and waiting is the biggest mistake you can make. Breakthrough therapies create incredibly compelling evidence of both extraordinary ability and national benefit. You must act while the momentum is high.
So don't wait for the journal article.
Do not wait for the final publication if you already have internal scaling milestones, pilot program data, or early clinical trial results that prove your impact. If you have data showing you reduced costs or improved viability, that is evidence.
That makes perfect sense.
Strike while the iron is hot, while the sector is in the spotlight, and while your contributions are actively shaping the leading edge of the field.
So across the board, the strategy is proactive documentation, elevating the narrative to align with national interests, and refusing to wait for an employer to give you permission to succeed.
That's it in a nutshell.
And the stories of the founders, the ones who built the $167 billion AI companies, they serve as the ultimate empirical proof that moving from a temporary visa to a green card via self-petition is a proven, viable path.
It's not a theory.
It is not some theoretical, risky loophole. It is the exact strategic mechanism that the most successful, most powerful people in the industry have utilized to secure their foundation and unleash their potential. Our team has guided many clients along this exact trajectory, proving that it works if you have the right strategy.
Which brings us to the most practical question.
Yeah.
What is the very first step a listener should take to begin this transition?
The smartest, most immediate step a listener can take right now to stop feeling anxious and start taking control of their own agency is to schedule a free eligibility audit via breakthroughusa.com.
It's a great starting point.
It is simply about getting a customized roadmap. It allows experts to look at your specific background, your publications, your milestones, assess the rapidly changing landscape we've discussed today, and map out the strongest, most viable path forward for your unique situation. It's about gathering information so you can make an empowered choice.
Because the one thing you absolutely cannot afford to do in this environment is nothing.
Exactly. Which brings us to a final, really provocative thought to leave you with as we wrap up this deep dive. We've spent this time talking about the risks of the market, the supply chain bottlenecks, the anxiety of employer dependency, and the perceived risks of applying for a self-petition.
We've covered a lot of risks.
But I want you to consider a different perspective. What if the biggest, most dangerous risk to your career isn't applying for a self-petition and facing government scrutiny? What if the true hidden crisis is actually staying perfectly still?
That's a powerful question.
Imagine just sitting at your desk, doing your job, and watching the greatest window of technological opportunity in a generation slowly close around you while your specific world-changing expertise is at its absolute peak demand, simply because you were too tethered to a hesitant employer to claim your own value.
That is the ultimate tragedy, allowing your peak potential and your ability to shape the future to quietly expire while you wait for someone else's permission to build your life.
Don't let that happen. Take control of the narrative. Thank you so much for being with us today. We hope you gained a lot from this discussion. Please leave us a comment if you can. Additionally, you can support our channel by sharing it with your friends and family, helping us build this community together. Also, follow us on Spotify, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, X, and Instagram, where we're growing rapidly thanks to our social media team. We would also like to thank attorney Chris Ingram and his dedicated team once again for researching and preparing this material for our presentation. See you next time on Let's Talk U.S. Immigration. Bye for now.